is for now clear. So today I will explain the second chapter of Class 10th Political Science, and that chapter is going to be Federalism. So federalism, now in the last chapter we had seen about the vertical form of government. That means we had seen the case of Belgium, and in this chapter also we are going to discuss about power sharing. We will discuss about power sharing or the federalism form of government. Now we'll see what is federalism, what is the form of government that is known as a federalism, and we will also discuss about the federalism in India. So all this we are going to discuss in this chapter. So let's start a chapter with our first topic, that is, what is federalism? So what is federalism? Now first let us discuss about what is federalism. Now as in the previous chapter, the first chapter of this book, we had discussed about the contrast cases of Sri Lanka and Belgium, and we have seen that in Belgium there were many changes, there were many amendments in the constitutions, and according to which there were more powers given to regional states, the state governments or the regional governments, than the central government. Now what happened now that earlier there were many powers that were given to the regional provinces, the regional government, but they was dependent to the central government of Belgium, and that was reduced, that was raised, or you could say that was amended by the amendment in the Constitution of Belgium in 1993. So that happened in 1993, and that is what we call federalism. As in federalism there are different levels or the tiers of the government. That is, one government, there are basically two forms or levels of government in a federalism. Now first one is that is for the entire country. So you could say that its main work is to see the whole country, for the benefits of the whole country, the relations, the international relations of the whole country, and that is known either by the federal government. So it is known as the federal government, or in India it is known as the central or union government. Now next level of government, it is that's provincial government. That is for the regional changes, that is for a perfect regional, each region or provinces or states you could say. So there are basically two levels or tiers of government in a federalism, in a federation, and that we have seen in the case of Belgium as well. Now in the Belgium we had seen that more power was given to the regional states, to the regional provinces you could say, and that is how they maintained the whole country, but that was refused to do so in Sri Lanka, and that we have seen that it had become, it continues to be a unitary country. As we have seen that Belgium, that was earlier unitary country, but after that it became a federal country, but Sri Lanka continues to be a unitary country. So you could say that was a change that we have seen in the previous chapter, and we'll see about federalism in this chapter. Now there are some of the features of federalism that we can say about that are the features of federalism, that are first that there are two or more levels of tiers of the government, as we have seen for the entire country and for the regional provinces, and there could also be a third tier of government that we'll discuss later in this chapter about India. Now all the jurisdiction of each government is given in the constitution. That is, you could say that all those government, different levels of government have their own jurisdiction for the area that is given by the constitution. So you could say that is constitutionally guaranteed, and the level of tax, their financial status is also being given by the constitution. So you could say that the level of taxation, the taxation matters have also been given and the constitution, so that to maintain their financial status, to secure the financial security. And after that you could say that they have, if there is any dispute that arises between the state government or the regional provincial government and the government that is for the entire country, then they could be the court of that country can act as an power for that dispute. So you could say that court can interpret any time the constitution and give powers, increase or reduce the powers of any level of the government. And after that you could just say that that if there is any dispute, then not all the levels of government don't have any kind of power to change the constitution of their country. Now for doing any amendment in the country, they need to have the consent of the other level of government as well. So these are some of the features of federalism that you could say that isn't a kind of unitary government. Now in unitary government, what happens that all the power would be given to the central government, or it could be that all these regional provinces are dependent or a kind of subordinate to all that central government. So that doesn't happen in the federalism, in a federation country. So these are some of the features of federation or federalism. And after that, there can be two types of federalism. As also know that federation varies from one federation. Federalism varies from one federation from another federation to another federation, you could say. Now there can be some variations, like there can be two types of federalism. First is coming together and second is holding together. Now coming together, that means that there are some states, there are many states in a continent and they have come together and have become a country, and that's why all the power has been given to those states, like for example the USA, the Switzerland or the Australia. Now what happened there, that as also know the United States of America, that those by name you can just say that's what it is. Now what happened that all those states had together. Now they came together, and after that they formed a country, a federation, in which there were powers that were divided among all the states, thus retaining their, thus you could say that reducing their sovereignty, erasing their sovereignty, and retaining the identity that they can increase. And after that, there is the holding together type of federation. Now holding together type of federalism, that means that like the countries like Spain, Britain, India or the Belgium that we had discussed in the previous chapter. That means if there is a very big state, big country, and after that it has decided to give division of power, to have a division of powers to all that state governments or the regional provincial governments. So that is known as the holding together type of federalism, that is seen in India as well, or the country like Belgium. As we have seen that Belgium, that was a very big country, not that much big country, but as a big country with ethnic composition. So you could just say that it amended its constitution for the unity of the country, and that led to federalism as well. So that is what is federalism, as we have discussed about what is federalism and about federation. That is federation varies from one to another. Now our next topic here is what makes India a federal country. So what makes India a federal country? Now, as we have seen the cases of Belgium and Sri Lanka, and we have seen that those are very small countries compared to India, but still had a very great diversity. So what about India? If they had faced so many problems in arranging all that power sharing system, in arranging the diversity of the country, then what about a vast country like India with so many languages, regions and regional cultures, religions in our country? It's also known that India, that is a very vast country and has a lot of diversity, like linguistic and that regional, religion and all those things. So what about India? What happened? How did we deal with it? Let's discuss about it. Now we have to say that India is a federal country as well. Now let us begin this with our constitution. Now we have seen that different features of federalism and just compare them to Indian government, to the system of federalism in India. Let us begin this with the Constitution of India. Now originally when Constitution was written, now there were two levels of government that were included in India. Now first, that was federal government, or in India it is known as the central government or the union government. Now you know what, that in the Constitution of India there was nowhere to be seen the word federalism, but it was still written as the union of states. So you could just say that federalism hasn't been used in the Constitution, but the features of the Constitution are just like federalism. Now first of all, there are levels of government, two-tier government in India, that is the state government, that is the regional provincial government, or the central government that we call union government as well. Now after that, around 1990, the third tier government in the forms of municipalities and panchayats was included in India with some powers as well. So that is how we can say that different forms of government and their powers as well, that includes a feature of the federalism. And in the constitution, all the matters of all the power sharing among all these that state and central government has been identified, has been given, and it can be seen by 3-4 list that is for the legislation of the jurisdiction. Now all these state government and the central government have the power of their own jurisdiction, have the power of jurisdiction that has been identified in the Constitution of India and the judiciary of our country. Whenever there is a dispute that arises between the state government and the central government, then the High Court or the Supreme Court, that is the highest court of India, will take it into its hands, will give jurisdiction on it, will purify it, you could say, will do an amendment or a kind of settle that dispute between these two levels of government. And after that, now there are 3-4 lists that have been given in the Constitution for the powers relating to all these governments, to the central government and the state government for the matters of jurisdiction. The first is union lists. The union list that includes all the matters that has to be identified, that has to be settled or solved by the union government, like that is for the whole country, that benefits or a kind of has an impact for the whole country. Matters like defense or the currency or the international affairs, relations of the country, all that is included in the union list. As all of you know that these are the matters for the whole country, not just for a region of a country. So you can just say that for India, union list is for the union government and all those matters for the whole country, like the defense, the currency and international relations and many more that are included in the union list. Then the next is the state list that includes the matters that are for the state government, that has to be solved or has to be settled by the state government. Matters like agriculture, the irrigation, the trade or the commerce has to be settled by the state government. As also know that for each state there would be different trade, there would be different commerce, there would be different policies for agriculture or irrigation that has an impact for a region, for a state, as there are cultural diversity among states in India. So it has to be settled by different policies in different states. Now the third list that has been given in the Constitution of India is a concurrent list. Now according to the concurrent list, all those matters that has to be settled, that has to be identified or has to be settled by both sides, by central government as well as the state government, like matters like education, the trade unions and all those things that include for the whole, that has an impact on state, each individual state as well as for whole the country. So those matters like education or the trade unions and all those things are included in the concurrent list. Now these three lists identify the matters that has to be settled, that has to be dealt with each level of the government, and that we can say that is a feature of federalism as well. Now whenever we talk about the holding together type of federation, now there is a first thing that comes to the mind that there isn't a kind of equal power sharing in the country. Now if you look at any of the states of the holding together type federation, now most of them don't have any kind of equal distribution of power. Now some states enjoy a little bit more power, like in India it used to be, like in Jammu and Kashmir. As also know that in Jammu and Kashmir, according to the Article 370 and 35A, what happened that it has some special powers. It has any law that had to be passed in Jammu and Kashmir had to be passed by their assembly first, and after that there were many restrictions on Jammu and Kashmir for the people that were not from that state. So you could say that it had its own special power, some kind of special status that was raised after in 2019 by the Prime Minister order. So you could just say that due to that, you can just say that in the holding together type of federation there was kind of unequal distribution of power sharing, and still in India there are some states that enjoy a little bit less power as compared to other states. Now there are some regions in India that are too small to be declared as a state and cannot be merged with any other countries, with any other states of India, that are the union territories of India. Now I can just say that here union government has more power than the state government. Now what would happen that in these regions there wouldn't be any kind of state government, and the union government would rule over that territory with its own. So there wouldn't be any kind of state government in that region, like the capital of India, the Delhi, New Delhi you could say, and after that Chandigarh and Lakshadweep and Andaman and Nicobar Islands. These are the areas, these are the union territories of India, and they do have the power. You could say that here all the power has been given to the central government, to the union government of India. So there are some, you could say that inequality between the state government and the central government. Still, there is a federation in India, there is a federalism in India, federalism form of government, because we can just say that for any change in the arrangements of the power sharing, it has to be done by the judiciary of India. You can say, just say that judiciary is powerful in India as well. It can interpret the decisions of both levels of government and can see whether there are the changes, all the constitutional provisions have been made or not, have been applied or not, and if there has to be any change in the arrangements of power sharing, then at least it has to be passed by the 2/3 majority from both houses of the parliament, and after that they need to have a consent from all the legislature of the state. So you can just say that at least half of the legislatures of the states for the change in the power sharing arrangements in India. Now if there is kind of dispute between these two levels of government for their jurisdiction, in the matter of jurisdiction about any matter that they have given, like in concurrent list. Now there are matters that for those matters both state government and the central government can make laws, but if their laws are contrasting with each other, then what would happen? Then the central government would prevail, the laws of the central government would prevail. So that is the system of India, and that is how India is a federal country, is a federation, and the holding together type of federation as well. Now our next topic here is, how is federalism practiced? So how is federalism practiced? Now you know what, that India, if there is a success of federalism in India, then it is not just because of the constitutional provisions, but it is a lot of the contribution is contributed by the democratic politics of our country. Now you know what, that by that democratic politics we have known that all those ideals of federalism, of together living, have come into India, have grown into India, and have been preserved as well. Now let us look in some ways how there was federalism that was practiced in India, with some experiments, with some, as also know that we have to do experiments before stating anything. So let's discuss some ways about how federalism is practiced in India, or how it was started in India. Now with our subtopic, that is linguistic states. So linguistic states. Now as all of you know that we got our independence in 1947, and after that we had a partition as well, a very bloody partition, or a kind of that led to many situations in India, hectic situations. And if we look at the political map of 1947 and to that of 2022, then you will see a lot of differences. As you can say that many states have been vanished and many states have been created, many new states have been created, some of the names have been changed. And why is it so? It has been because on the basis of linguistic differences. There have been, as also know that from a long history of India, there has been a very great diversity in India, and even after independence we had a lot of linguistic differences in our country, and that's why we have to demarcate, we have to create more states or merge two states, we have to create more and more new states on the basis of linguistic differences. And not just on the basis of linguistic differences, they were also on the basis of cultural differences or the ethnicity, like states like Jharkhand, Nagaland. These states that have been formed on the basis of ethnicity or the cultural differences. So you could say that in India, a lot of states have been created. Many of the states have been created on on the language matters are the basis of linguistic differences. The first ever state that was created in India on the basis of linguistic differences was Andhra Pradesh. So that you could say that. Now what happened that it was a kind of experimental situation for the leaders of India. Now first they thought that it would lead to the disintegration of the country, as already there was a bloody partition in our country, that was India and Pakistan, and all the leaders, big leaders of our country, were fearing that it would lead to disintegration. But now as we can see that it has led to a federalism, to the success of federalism in our country and to the unity of our country as well. Now you know what, that federalism that holds the unity of the country and at the same time accommodates the regional diversities as well. That is a feature of federalism, and that can be seen in India. So you can just say that linguistic states that have been created by different laws, by making many acts, and that is how the political map of India is formed. Now recently there was a change of Jammu Kashmir and Ladakh, that we had seen that Ladakh now became a union territory, and as well as Jammu and Kashmir. So as we can see that there are many differences that have been. Now in 2014 there was a state that was created, that is Telangana. So we can just say that there have been many linguistic states, many states that have been created on the basis of linguistic differences, and that has led to success of federalism as well. Now our next subtopic here is language policy. So language policy, that matters most very much in our country. Now you know what, that if we talk about the language of our country, many people just think that Hindi is the national language of our country. But you know what, that by the Constitution of India, and Constitution there has nowhere to be seen the Hindi language has not been declared as the national language of our country. But still the Hindi was declared as the official language after Constitution was made. But after that, you know what, that by 1965 it was arisen that English would be stopped in official items, in official documentaries. English would be stopped by 1965. It had to be stopped in 1965 in official documentaries, in official statements, or in official work. But after that there were many critics that arose saying that all those non-Hindi speakers. Now you know what, that when English was banned, then of course obviously there would be Hindi language that would dominate over our country. Now what would happen, that all those non-Hindi speakers, you know what, that in our country 40% of all the populations, that all the people in our country have their mother tongue Hindi, have Hindi as their mother tongue. But what about the remaining 60%? And that's why we need to consult, we need to think about all those languages, other languages as well. And that's why all those non-Hindi speakers in 1965 arose, had a kind of voluntary form, meaning that in Tamil Nadu it had its voluntary form, and that is how English was also introduced as in the official work of our country. You know what, that for all those non-Hindi speakers, English is very easy to learn, as also know that for then compared to Hindi, and that's why they now wanted English to be as the official language, or kind of an official work. And that is why you know that in official work of our country, Hindi and English are both used. And if we talk about Hindi, then it is the official language of India. That doesn't mean that there aren't any other languages in our country's constitution, or in any they aren't recognized. You know what, that besides Hindi there are 21 other languages that have been recognized in the schedule of our constitution. Now totally there are 22 languages that have been recognized, including Hindi, in the schedule of our constitution. So you can just say that all those languages, if there is an examination that has to be started, it has to be introduced. So for all the central position, for central rankings, if it is for the work in central government, then there will be option of these 22 languages, and after that all those candidates can opt for any their regional languages, for any languages that they know better. Now you know what, that like for example the UPSC examinations, or the state service examinations, and the civil service examinations, you know what, that we have an option of languages as well, of these scheduled languages, of these 22 scheduled languages, and any candidate can opt for any language that has been scheduled in the constitution of our country. Now that is on the central level, but what about the state level? You know what, that even in the state level there are official languages for each state, for their regional, concerning all that regional states, regional culture of that state. That doesn't matter on the central level, because if there is an examination that has to be held in the center, in the state, and obviously all the languages of the state would be included. And if it is for the central government, then obviously all that official languages that have been concerned or have been recognized in the schedule of our constitution would be given as an option for all those candidates. So that is how the language policy works in India. Now you know what, that there have been many critics in history. If you look at the history of our country, modern history of our country, then there have been many critics opposing to the English language, to the use of English language, but still we can say that there isn't any kind of revolt or any kind of that is leading to the situation of our country in a bad situation. So we can just say that there have been language policy. We have recognized, the government of India has recognized the languages, many languages as well, and that has led to federalism as well. Now you know what, that languages matter so much. Now you know what, that the main policy of our central government has been the promotion of Hindi language, but that doesn't mean that it was as it was done in Sri Lanka, as they had just imposed their Sinhala languages. But still in India, you could say that there have been promotion of Hindi language, but not as so much imposing that Hindi languages on the people of our country. So on a balanced manner, you can just say that language policy has helped for the success of federalism in our country as well. Now our next subtopic here is center-state relations. So center-state relations. Now if we talk about the federalism or all that structure of the constitution, all that structure of the government of a country, then what is the most important thing here is, beside the citizens themselves? Now what do you think? Now all that relation between the central government and the state government matters the most. You know what, that how there would be federalism in our country depends on the relations of these two levels or tiers of the government. Now earlier, after the independence, what happened, that for the whole country and the central government there was a party that was ruling for many years, and after that in state government, in states as well, it was ruling. So there wasn't any kind of opposition of it. As I also know that I'm discussing about the Indian National Congress. As I also know that earlier, after 1947, it had its rule for the whole country and in states as well. Now there wasn't any kind of its rival that was standing, and if there was some states, if in any states by chance there was the state government of any opposing party, then what would happen, that the central government would just dismiss it in a very arbitrary manner, and that is how the situation changed in 1990s. Now in 1990s, after 1990, what happened, that now in many different states government were arising and were now ruling over different states. Now there were many rival states. You know what, that after 1990 there was an era of coalition government as well. Before that, in many states, now many state parties or rival parties were arising, opposing to the ruling party over the country, and that is how, if they were in small proportion, if they were in one or two states, then they would just be dismissed in an arbitrary manner. But if they were rising in so much manner, then what will happen? That it will lead a kind of power sharing in our country. The relations between the central government and state government would have been conflicted, would be so much controversial, you can say. But after 1990, what happened, that the coalition government, there was an era of coalition government. Now what happened, that in Lok Sabha there wasn't any kind of party that had a so much majority by the people through the elections, and that is why they formed alliances. They allied with each other, 3 or 4 parties or even more parties, or just 2 parties just formed an alliance, and that is how they coalited each other. They formed an alliance, and if they were elected, then there would be a coalition government that would be formed. Like even today we see that in the recent elections we have seen many coalition, that many alliances of different parties in the recent elections of our country. So you can just say that the situation of the relation between state government and central government changed after the coalition government in 1990, and that has also led to the success of federalism. Now what would happen, that if there is a coalition government that has won the elections, that is that not just one party is electing now our country, but now 2, 3 or 4 parties are electing, and they would elect the leader of our country. And after that, even in state elections, there will be different rival parties opposing to those. So both of them would have a kind of relation that is known as the central state relations in our country. So you can just say that for India, for the success of federalism in India, state-center relations also matter most. Although from long history it hasn't been so much good, but now it has been seen as there are different rival parties. Now there would be conflicts, but as well as the power sharing. As there are more candidates, that means that there would be more power sharing. So that is how the federalism is practiced in our country. In India, by some experiments like the language policy or the linguistic states or the relations between the central government and the state government. Now our next topic here is linguistic diversity of India. So linguistic diversity of India. Now let us discuss the diversity, the linguistic diversity, that is the diversity based on the languages differences of our country. Now you know what, that if we look at the linguistic diversity of our country, then we can say that on the basis of linguistic diversity, our country is the largest linguistic diversity country. Now there is a lot of diversity based on languages, as we can see from the census reports. Now according to the census report of 2001, there were around 1500 languages that were claimed to be mother tongues of different people. Now they were 1500, but they are grouped as 114 languages. Now why is it so? Now you know what, that if you look at the Hindi, now in Hindi all those languages like Bundelkhandi and Bhojpuri, Bhili languages are included. So they are grouped under just one group, under just one languages, that is known as Hindi language, and that is why 1500 different mother languages, you know what, very distinct languages those were, and that's why they are grouped under a kind of standard language or a kind of those type of language that was spoken even a little bit more than them, and that is why 1500 distinct languages, distinct mother tongues were converted as 140 languages on the report card, on the report of the census of 2001. And after that, if we look at the census report of 2011, now there were around 121 languages that were recorded, that was reported, submitted by the survey that was conducted, and 121 languages were found in India as the mother tongue of the people. Now you know what, that not every language in India is spoken in a very large scale. Now look at Hindi language. Now if we talk about Hindi language, then there are around 41.3% people. Around 41% people speak Hindi as their mother tongue, have Hindi language as their mother tongue. And if we take all those people who have Hindi language, who can speak Hindi language as their second or third language, then still it can go more than 50%. So then how we can say that it is the national language of our country or the official language, and that is why we have the schedule languages. Now schedule languages, you know what, that in the 8th schedule of our constitution we have 22 languages, 22 official languages, and that is what we call schedule languages. And all those other languages that are not recognized in the schedule, in the 8th schedule of our constitution, are known as the non-scheduled languages. So all those languages like Assamese, Bengali, Gujarati, Hindi, Malayalam, Manipuri, Kashmiri, Konkani, and Kannada language, Urdu language, Santali language, all those are included in the schedule of our country, in the schedule of the constitution. So you can just say that linguistic diversity is very diverse. You know that in our country there is a lot of diversity based on the languages, we can just say. Now our next and last topic of this chapter is decentralization in India. So decentralization in India. Now let's discuss about the decentralization in our country. Now you know what, that till now we have discussed about the two-tier government, two levels of the government, the central government and the state government. But you could just say that a vast country like India just can't be governed by just two tiers of the government, that are the state government and the central government. You know what, that the states, many of the states of our country are even bigger in size or in population than the independent countries of Europe. Like in terms of population, Uttar Pradesh is larger than Russia. You know what, the population of our Uttar Pradesh state of our country is even more than that of Russia. So we can just say that in terms of population it is bigger than Russia, and Maharashtra than countries like Germany. So you can just say that they are larger than the independent countries, either in the size or in population, than the independent countries of Europe. develop, and that is why we need even more levels of the government, a kind of third tier government to govern the local level of our country. You know what, that in a state there is so much diversity as well. There are so much cultural differences even in an individual state. You know what, that even in an individual state there is a need of more governing parties, and that is why in 1992, you know what, that there was a kind of decentralization that was resulted after it. Now decentralization in simple terms means that all that power, when it is given to the local government, that is known as a decentralization. Now you know what, that if there is a state, then what would happen, that there is a state government that has been elected, and after that on district levels, on the village levels, on rural areas, in urban areas, on the local level there will be third tier government that is known as a local government, and it is also known as a decentralization, as more and more power from the center of our country and of the state have been given to those local government, those third tier of the government, and that is known as a decentralization, and that is what we need more and more in our country. Now you know what, that decentralization has been proven more and more efficient in our country, because now people can participate for their decisions. You know what, that in the local level people can participate for their decisions, and people have a very great knowledge of the problems of their localities, and that is why we need to give them opportunities for the decisions in their localities, and that is what is the principle for constitution as well, that is known as a self-government, and that is gone through, that has been given to the people of our country through decentralization. Now what would happen, that earlier when constitution was made, was written, was completed, now there was term for decentralization, for third tier government, but you know what, that only third tier government doesn't, we need to give them resources, the power, the elections should be held properly. That was not being done earlier, but it was only after 1992 that more power was given to the third tier government of our country, or the third level of government, that is what we call the local government of our country. Now according to which all the elections in Gram Panchayat, in Gram Sabha, in the local governments were now mandatory, and at least 1/3 of all the positions are represented as reservated for the women, have been reservations made. You know what, that reservations have been made for women for at least 1/3 of the whole positions of local government, and after that there have been reservations for the other backward classes, OBCs, you know what, then backward classes, scheduled castes, and the scheduled tribes of our country. So there are many more powers. You know what, that according to after the changes in the constitution in 1992, states were now bonded to give powers and resources and their power, to share their power with the local government. So you can just say that after 1992 there was more power that was given to the local government. And if we talk about the local government, let us discuss about the structure of the local government as well. Now in the rural areas there is a Gram Panchayat. Now you know what, that in rural areas there are many sectors that have been divided, or what we call wards, and after that many people, all the people of those villages would choose a kind of Gram Panchayat, would elect the Gram Panchayat, and in that Gram Panchayat, that is what Gram, that means in Hindi that is known as the village. So word Panchayat, that is Gram Panchayat, in that there would be many members. In that council there would be many members, commonly known as Panch, and a president, that is known as a Sarpanch, or you can say that is the president of whole council, that is a Gram Panchayat. And after that all those members have been elected by the adults of that village, that have been living in that village. All the adults would elect them, and after that their work would also be supervised by the Gram Sabha, in which all the members of the village can participate, are the members of the Gram Sabha. So you can just say that there is a Gram Sabha which supervises the work of Gram Panchayat, and all the members, all the people that are living in the village or the members of the Gram Sabha. Now Gram Sabha at least has to meet twice or thrice in an annual year for checking the budget that has been represented by the Gram Panchayat and the work for using their money in efficient works at least twice or thrice a year. So that is the work of rural area, and it goes up to the district level as well. After that, many Gram Panchayats would be joined together and would be known as block or mandals or the Panchayat Samiti that we call in the common language of our country. So commonly it is known as block or Panchayat Samiti, you can just say. And after that it is kind of upper level than that, and after that it would go to district level and would be known as the Jila Parishad. Now Jila, that means district, so a kind of district parishad or Jila Parishad in Hindi. And after that, you know what, that there would be head of Jila Parishad as well, that would be the chairman of the Jila Parishad. You know what, that MLAs or the MPs of that particular district can also be member of that Jila Parishad. But you know what, that the chairman of the Jila Parishad is the head of Jila Parishad, that has to be mounted for the head of Jila Parishad as well. So that is the system, local government system of rural areas or in district. But what about the urban areas? Now in towns too there are municipalities, and in big cities there are municipal corporations. These two have worked. You know that municipal corporations in cities and municipalities, municipal office work in the towns that are a little bit small cities or the towns, and those together, you know what, that municipal corporations, in there are also mayor. Now you know what, that in municipal corporations there would be head, that would be the chairman of that municipal corporation, and that is bound, who is bound to be the chair, or who is bound to be the head of the municipal corporation, and is commonly known as the mayor of that district. So you can just say that is the structure of the local government in rural areas and in urban areas as well. Now mayor, as also you have discussed about it, we have heard about it. Now that is the system of decentralization in our country, as we have seen the third-tier government of our country. Now after that we have seen that it has been proven very efficient for our country as well. Now around 36 lakh people are included in all the methods, in all the participations, in all the local government. That is around 3.6 million people, and that is even more than many countries' population, the whole population of many countries. So you can just say that many people are now participating for their own decisions, for their own localities, for their self-governing themselves. Now there is a method, there is a provision of self-governing that has been introduced among the society of our country, and that is, we are seeing that more and more people are now participating in making self-decisions for themselves, and that is what we call decentralization, as more and more power from center of the country or center of the state has been given to those local government. Now we have seen that it has been proven very efficient, but still we have a very long way to go. You know what, that still in many Gram Sabhas, in many Gram Panchayats, there aren't any kind of elections that are being held, or they are kind of very repressive, or states are not sharing their power with the local government. So there are still some issues, but still we have improved a lot in our country after the independence, and we can just say that federalism has been a success in our country as well, a big success or a great success. Now we can just say that still we have got a long way to go, but still we have achieved so much. Now let us discuss a condition, that is discuss an example of Brazil. Now Brazil, that is a country in South America, and there is a city that is the Alegre or Porto Alegre, and there a very great experiment, a very kind of new experiment was experimented, a kind of new situation was created. Now there was a parallel organization that was created by the government, and after that was parallel to the local government, and all that kind of experiment of parallel organization in which all the 30 lakh people of all that city were included. So you can just also that populations were not governing themselves as they were made in a parallel organizations. They would hold the meetings as is done in our country by the Gran Sabha, and would elect themselves, would have decisions for themselves, would spend money for themselves, would spend money in efficient ways. And that is why in that city there have been many improvements, many achievements. Now buses are in some areas in colonies as well, and all the contractors can't just dwell away. They can't just suppress all the slum dwellers. They can't just suppress all the slum dwellers until they resettle them. So you can just say that that was an experiment in Brazil, and that is also seen in some of the cities of Kerala in our country. So we can just say that that is how decentralization works in our country, and that is all we have discussed in this chapter. Now in this chapter we saw what is a federalism, and there are two aspects of federalism, that is mutual trust and the agreement to live together. That is mutual trust, there must be some trust between the state government and the central government, and the agreement to live together. And after that we saw the situation of India. We saw that why India is a federal country and what makes India a federal country, and how it is practiced in our country as well. So we saw all these things in this chapter. I've discussed all topics and subtopics, and the next remaining chapters of this book will be covered in the further upcoming videos. So thank you very much.